Yes, what I'm going to do is just give you a quick run through what the Scottish Tech Army has been set up to do and what it's been working on over the last 5 months. It was our 5-month anniversary, or month anniversary on Monday. And I know this community is all very much based around startups and scale-ups and that kind of thing. And my background is in the early stage tech industry, as is the co-founder of the Scottish Tech Army, Peter Jaco, who's a friend and colleague of mine. And so we both experienced the early stage startup environment for quite a long time, but neither of us actually have ever seen anything that's taken off at the speed that the Tech Army has. So pleasure to be able to talk to you about that today. So let's, why am I not getting slides moving? There we go. Yeah, so the background to this was that obviously it was all stimulated by the coronavirus pandemic when that hit. So you can see the timeline there. The first confirmed case in the UK was late January, and things progressed, as we all know, very quickly from there, such that the late March we had the UK lockdown came into force. And we also had the furlough scheme, the job retention scheme. So very shortly after that, we started having conversations about this early April, and we got the whole thing together within about 3 weeks or so, and ended up launching on the 28th of April of this year. So that was the starting point. We set out with a number of initial objectives. We really were observing two things. One, that the impact of coronavirus on lots and lots of organizations in the public sector, the third sector, was that they were really being strained in terms of being able to deliver the services that they deliver to their various constituencies. And also that there was going to be a whole community of people in the tech community who suddenly, they're used to working on products, on projects with a team, and suddenly all that gets taken away overnight. So the three objectives really were to help with implementation of tech solutions for the third sector and the public sector, thereby to generate some public good in terms of being able to help with delivery of services, but equally and very importantly, this idea of offering a sense of purpose and achievement for the volunteers. And the uptake was tremendous. We benefited from support from a lot of organizations in helping us to get the thing off the ground. And we ended up with about 150 volunteers signing up on day one, literally day one of the initiative, which was very encouraging, and we've seen it continue to go very strongly from there onwards. There are a number of kind of guiding principles that we've used in order to help us to try and scale. It's very much taking the lean startup, the agile approach around this. So starting off with some big ideas, but making sure we start off small, iterating quickly to develop our ideas as we go. And an expression that we've used throughout this process, it feels like we're building the plane while it's in the air. And we're kind of bolting on wings and engines and stuff as we identify the need for them. So it's not something that was a big strategy at the start. It was very much a response initiative. From the early days, we had spoken extensively with the Scottish Government, and particularly the Digital Directorate, and CivTech as a part of that, which I'm sure many of you are aware of, as a body that was set up to generate innovation in tech into the public sector. Social media has been a really key part of that, and I'll show you some statistics later on that's helped us to scale quickly. I mentioned that we've had a lot of support from many businesses in the tech sector to help us to get ourselves off the ground and to deliver these projects. And the approach from the outset was to try and reach out directly to as many organizations as we could to get the support for this and the volunteers to deliver the projects. Again, I'll show you some statistics about that in a minute. One of the really interesting things about it has been the fact that, by the very nature of this is something which it's all been done using online tools. We've got these hundreds of volunteers who signed up really quickly. More or less nobody knew each other before this started. We couldn't get everybody in a room to talk about it. So from the outset, it's made it's had to make extensive use of online tools. So the things that you're all familiar with, Slack and Zoom and those kind of tools to make this happen. To coordinate what we're doing, and also to develop this as a community. And that's another of the things that's been really encouraging, is to see the level of interaction between people who are now in this community. I mentioned the support we've had from a number of people and the use of social media. One of the things that we did right from the outset was to identify about 150 people in the tech and business community around Scotland, who we seeded the idea with in the week or so running up to the launch of this, to say to them, look, we're getting this organization together. We're going to be launching on the 28th of April. We'd really appreciate your support to help amplify the message on social media. And so the first thing that went up on that Tuesday morning was the one you see on the left there, which was a piece in the Scotsman that we shared. And that was at about 9 o'clock on the Tuesday morning. And we got almost 8,000 impressions on that immediately, because we'd had the support of all these people who were helping us. The kind of our official launch tweet was 10 o'clock, and that's about 5,000 impressions. And over 12,000 impressions on our, we're 1 month old kind of thing. So that was something that worked really well for us, was kind of curating an audience of influencers and priming them to amplify the message. So as I say, a few days ahead, we'd send a message out saying it's happening on Tuesday. The day before, there was another one, don't forget, and at 10 o'clock, literally, they all got the same message, it's go time, we've shared these things, can you get on it? So, hugely appreciative of all the support we've had from the business and tech community around Scotland as a whole. So by the end of the first month, we got to the point where we had a really strong uptake from the tech community in terms of volunteers. So we had more than 700 volunteers. At that point, we had about 30 project ideas that had been suggested to us. So the first phase was very much about volunteer recruitment and raising awareness. Second phase was about encouraging people to submit project ideas to us. And the intention was to encourage people to come forward with not much more than a problem statement, really. So there was no assumption of expertise or experience in how you might solve that problem, because what I'll touch on in a minute is the fact that in many third sector organizations, they're very cash strapped. They may not have experience in using these kind of tools. So trying to keep it as low a barrier to entry as possible for them. And so, both in terms of volunteers and project numbers, we've seen that continue to grow. We've also been really heartened by the coverage we've been able to see across Scotland. I mean, very often, so many of these kind of initiatives tend to be Central Belt focused or focused on one particular city. And we've had a great reaction from people across the length and breadth of Scotland, in fact. So the projects are being delivered to communities all around the country. And that's helping to make sure that we can cover as much of our community around Scotland as we can. In terms of the community that we've built, again, lots of the events that happen in Scotland, they do tend to be geographically focused, because historically they've typically been face-to-face gatherings, they've been networking events, so people get together in a physical space to do these kind of things. And we've seen a very wide spread of volunteers across Scotland. So we've got people from pretty much every region, every county in Scotland who are represented there. And in terms of the demographics, you see some stats there, but it's a broad range in terms of skill sets, in terms of age range, in terms of the skill sets that people bring. So we have a podcast that runs, we're up to episode 11 now, and this week's podcast, one of the volunteers who is featured on that was talking about the fact that he joined up not having come from a tech background, and he was a little bit hesitant initially as whether he would be the right fit, whether he'd be able to make a contribution. And it was just fantastic to hear him talking about the experience he's had of being able to put his skills from another sector to work to support these projects, to interact with other members of the team, And so it's really brought that community together across a very wide variety of backgrounds and skill sets. I mentioned earlier that we have used Slack extensively as one of the tools. Those of you who use Slack, you may have come across a little app called Donut that you can install into Slack. And what that does is, for people who sign up to the channel it's in, it basically just matches you up with 3 people at random twice a week and says, why don't you have a call? And it's such a simple mechanic, but it was unbelievably effective at forming the community because, you know, as I say, we've got all these hundreds of people who don't know each other. You know, some people are comfortable putting themselves out there and contacting people and saying, you know, why don't we have a chat? Other people, it's a much more difficult thing for them to make that first step. And this is such a low barrier to entry. It really did help to get that mixing of people from many different backgrounds, and helps with the formation of the community. So it's a really simple kind of tool, but it worked really well for us. I mentioned that, you know, we've had project ideas submitted from lots of different organizations. It's about 300 ideas we've had submitted so far now. But we've also had some which have been generated internally. And this is a particularly interesting one. And as it happens, some of you may have heard on Good Morning Scotland this morning, a piece about this COVID-19 dashboard for Scotland. And this is one that we set up to encourage the teams to self-organize and to create little mini project teams. So we did it as a 2-week challenge, a homebrew challenge. We had 4 teams who self-organized to create a visualization of the data that's published by the Scottish Government and the NHS around COVID case numbers, fatalities around Scotland. And they each worked separately, and then at the end of that period, we got the 4 teams to combine to create a composite of all of them. And they've been so enthusiastic, so passionate about that. They've carried on working on that ever since. So that was in June that we kicked that off. And they're working away at it, and it's evolved to the point now where it's available as a public service. One of the particular aspects of it that we were highlighting in the media this week is the fact that we've added what we call sonification, which is taking time series data and representing that using audio tones. So people who've got visual impairment can access the data as well. So trying to improve the accessibility of the data. But this was very much a kind of self-organizing team. There was nobody told them how to do it. They just got themselves together. They've applied, you know, all the practices that they bring in from their own experience. So in terms of how you run projects, so we're using, you know, standard tools, you know, to maintain a product backlog and to do the development work, to deploy it into AWS. And that's been a tremendous initiative that the group of volunteers has created, you know, off their own initiative, really. One of the things that we're particularly keen on is to look at how can we not only solve problems for individual organizations, but to turn these into scalable solutions. And very briefly, one that we are launching fairly shortly is based on a project we did with an organization up in Aberdeen, Voluntary Services Aberdeen, who came to us very early with a challenge around how they could manage their stocks of PPE. So they had been able to get sufficient stocks, but they were managing it all using spreadsheets and email, which is a real nightmare. So we put the project team together, worked together with the VSA team members, and deployed a solution which they're now using to manage all of that. And that was launched about 6 weeks after the initial contact. So what we're doing, you know, all of us in the tech sector, the immediate thing you think of is, well, how can we scale this? So we're in the process now of putting a multi-tenanted deployment of that into production, so that we can offer that out to many different organizations around Scotland. So again, that's one of the kind of principles that we've taken from our backgrounds in the tech industry, of rather than just solving a problem once for one organization, how can we solve it once and make it available to many? So that's one that is going to be launching next month. I think, you know, in summary, you know, what we've seen and experienced this last few months is something that has been really very powerful. The fact that so many people have come together and have committed their time, their talents to do this. The initial focus was on trying to recruit people who had been put on furlough or who may have been made redundant even already, And we certainly did have lots of them, but we've also seen lots of graduates coming through who are going to be looking for their first role in the tech sector. We've seen people who have full-time jobs who have signed up and volunteered and have made amazing contributions just because, you know, they wanted to play their part, they wanted to contribute. And, you know, what we've seen is that there's very clear evidence to us that, you know, there's much more that we can do than just simply work on these coronavirus-related problems. We're looking to catalyze, you know, a real change in the way that technology gets used in the public and third sectors in Scotland. And the volunteers are really enthusiastic, very energized about that, really keen to do that. So this is something that, while we set it up initially without any real view of how long this might last, is definitely something we do think has a long-term future. And so that's what we're working on now, is to figure out how can we turn this into a longer-term initiative that has longer-term value. So that's it so far. Hopefully it gives you a bit of a flavour of what we've been up to. Happy to share the slide deck with the ProductTank team if they want to make it available. And yeah, very happy to take any questions that anybody has.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Alistair. That's great. So interesting, the amount that you've managed to achieve in such a short time scale, and how you've been able to scale up this quickly and you know, help these organisations out that are in desperate help. I assume some of them will be. We've got quite a few questions that have come in, so I'm going to pass over to Meg, who's going to moderate that Q&A. So yeah, Meg, if you want to just take over from me.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, and thanks very much, Alistair. It was really interesting. I'll kick off because there's quite a few questions coming in. So the first one is from JB, saying that you mentioned public sector and third sector companies when you were talking, but do you also do projects for for-profit companies? And if you do, what's the split like between those two sectors?
Sure. So to date, we haven't done that. And that was a conscious decision, because all the volunteers are giving their time free, and what we wanted to do was to avoid a situation where, you know, they were effectively creating value that they weren't sharing in. So the focus has very much been on public and third sector. We are actually looking at some mechanisms now where, you know, for the longer term, we can find a way that we can engage with for-profit companies, especially early stage companies, that, you know, where we can have the right combination of giving some of the volunteers who are, you know, right at the start of their careers valuable experience, so they're getting that level of value out of it, but also giving some value potentially to some for-profit companies. So that's an evolving situation. It hasn't been the case to date, but it's more likely to be going forwards.
Great, thanks very much. And a quick one in from Russell saying donut sounds great, but what are your kind of tools and top tips for managing such a large community from a remote basis?
Sure. So the two core tools in terms of direct interaction have been Slack and Zoom. I've used Slack in previous environments, and, you know, it's been a useful tool, but it's been absolutely pivotal to the work of getting the tech army together. And, you know, every tool has its limitations, but it has worked really well. We've also used, in terms of the management of the projects, we've also used the Atlassian toolset. So we've been using Jira and Confluence. Quite a lot of the tech vendors were making available access to their tools free of charge in the period of immediately following the outbreak of the pandemic. So, you know, we benefited from free access to the full version of Slack. We've had the Atlassian toolset. We had a free period of use of Donut. And so quite a number of those companies have stepped forward to give access to their tool sets. But I would say those are the key ones. So the Atlassian toolset, Slack and Zoom are the main ones that we've been focused on.
Great. It's awesome to hear you've kind of been jumping on what other companies have been offering during the pandemic as well to help out. Cool. Another one in from JB saying that they've done things like this before, and one of the big challenges is that it can often be easier right at the start to get a lot of work done, and kind of getting off the ground is maybe the easier part. And what about ongoing support? So how do you provide ongoing support for the projects after you've initially delivered them?
Yeah, that's a key point. And it actually relates also to the fact that we very deliberately constrained the scope of what we've done to projects that can be delivered in days to weeks rather than months to years, because, because it's a volunteer group that's doing it, we don't necessarily know how long people are going to be able to remain involved. So we talk about, you know, the Goldilocks projects for us would be something like 4 to 6 people for 4 to 6 weeks. Now, you know, the idea is that we can deliver something of value. The level of capability that's required to sustain those solutions varies, obviously, depending on what we put in place. So in some cases, it was relatively simple stuff around helping people to use tools like Teams or Zoom or whatever, and get devices rolled out. And one, you know, part of that includes the training on how to use it. So the idea is to make those organizations fairly self-sufficient. At the other end of the spectrum, we've got the project I mentioned, whereby we're taking that solution that we developed with Voluntary Services Aberdeen and turning that into a multi-tenant platform. So for that, we're having to actually put in place mechanisms whereby people are signing up for a kind of longer term involvement in that. It definitely does need to be done in such a way that we've got a good spread of coverage for that, because people's individual situations will vary over time. So they may be, you know, more able to be involved at a certain point in time, and other times they'll have to step back a bit. So it's about spreading the load. We do still see, you know, quite an encouraging rate of sign-ups. So we're seeing about, you know, 20 volunteers a week still signing up, new volunteers. We're also talking, and we'll be announcing very shortly, partnership with Scotland Is, the tech trade body, to encourage people from their member organizations to volunteer, you know, very much on a part-time basis, to bring in some additional experience and expertise around that. So it's definitely something that's got to be actively curated and managed, and that's part of the process we're going through now to make sure that we have a resilient organization that we can be sustainable in doing this.
Great, thanks very much for that insight. A quick and hopefully an easy one from Jenny was just to comment on the great success you noted in the first day even. So why do you think the project took off quite so quickly?
So I think there were a few contributory factors. So first of all, in advance of the launch, we had contacted some people that we knew and had worked with before, in particular 2 organizations, a PR company, Hot Tune Roof PR, based here in Edinburgh, who I'm sure many of you will be familiar with, who helped us with, you know, the media announcements, the releases, getting all of that ready. We had a graphic designer from a company called Porridge Design, who designed some of the really eye-catching graphics that we've got. So that helped in terms of spreading the message and making it, you know, something that stands out on social media, makes it appealing. And this approach I mentioned of identifying and targeting these influencer community. So we had about 150 on that list, and, you know, tremendous level of support. So they really amplified the message. So, you know, on day one, we're an organization with 0 followers on any social media network as an organization. So getting the benefit of their amplification of our message was absolutely pivotal to it. And it's like what you see in successful crowdfunding campaigns. It's all about momentum. You know, so once you get that started, if you can sustain that, it does help to kind of keep the momentum going. So, you know, those are some of the tactics that we used.
That's great, and fingers crossed that momentum carries on for you for the future.
Absolutely.
Cool, I'll round off just with a minute to go with the one last question. It's a super interesting one coming from Alex Owenhill, is what is your criteria for assessing the projects that come into you?
So we started out with 3. So one was that it was specifically related to the pandemic and the impacts of that, because we wanted to make sure that we were tackling the most urgent things that were really time critical. So not that other projects that might have been suggested wouldn't have been valuable, but we wanted to do something that was immediately addressing the challenge that were being faced. The second one was one related to what I talked about, which is it had to be something that was tractable for us as an organization. So it wasn't too big. It didn't have too many external dependencies, and it was something that we were confident we could deliver in a short space of time. And the third one was that, you know, it would have a meaningful impact on a sufficiently, you know, large number of people. So, you know, it was going to benefit, you know, a decent community of people. So those were the 3 that we started out with. That is changing a bit, as I say, as we evolve this, but those were the criteria we used. And, you know, it was important to have those criteria because it meant that we had what we called the triage team, who stepped forward to help us with managing all those requests. So, you know, having a framework to do that certainly made it a lot easier.
Great, thanks very much. I'll pass back to Marie to close up the session.
Great. So thanks very much, Alistair. That was super interesting. I think, you know, as a community as well, here we can all sort of rally around and help you to continue to drive that. And so that's fantastic. So thanks everyone for attending. I'm going to wrap up there. So if you want to just keep an eye on our social channels, this will be recorded and we'll put that up very soon. And we do all of our future announcements across all of our social channels. So we recommend you following them for more information. Our next one is set to be on the 28th of October. So just put that in your diary and we'll follow up with more details for that. So yeah, in the meantime, have a great week, everyone, and we will chat to you very soon.
Thanks so much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.